Kevin Haig.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It does sound as if all parties will be supporting this bill. So I thought I might make some reflections on the problem that we're trying to solve here. And my reflection is that the straitened financial circumstances that the health sector so often finds itself in sometimes leads to very poor strategic decision making. So when we look at mental health, sir, we have moved from an era where the approach to people with mental illness was to institutionalise. And we all recognise that actually that is not the correct approach for most people. So we closed down the big psychiatric hospitals, but then did not invest properly in creating the community-based support services that were required to replace them, with the consequence that now we have both community-based services and acute units that are struggling to cope and a chaos for people with mental illness. Mr. Speaker, we know that secondary care, the need for secondary care and the cost of secondary care could be saved by a much better investment in public health services and in primary care services. Yet, do we make that investment? And Mr. Speaker, we do not. In fact, in the last several years under this government, it's those precise services that have borne the brunt of funding cuts. So rather than taking us closer to a situation where we make the smart strategic choice to invest in keeping people well in the community and thereby saving costs in secondary care, in actual fact, we exacerbate the need for secondary care. We exacerbate the problem because our thinking is constrained by short-term considerations. And Mr. Speaker, that's how this problem has arisen, because we have had a strategy now for at least the past 15 years, I would say, called ageing in place, where we say we actually do not want to consign all of our older people to require rest home and hospital level care as soon as they start to struggle to cope in their own homes. So let's instead bring services to them, because that is the best thing for them, and it's also the best thing in the long run for our services. But what's happened is that we've made that our strategy and yet have failed to put in place the appropriate level of community-based services that older people need to be able to remain in their own homes. And this bill addresses one of the facets of that issue. Several speakers have mentioned Judy McGregor's report, and Judy McGregor's report, Caring Counts, addressed this as one of the most significant issues because she said it was an injustice. She said it added to the precarious nature of the work by community-based support workers. And Mr. Speaker, I put the case to the House, and I've heard other speakers in this debate do so, that we have gotten away with failing to appropriately reimburse for travel costs, principally because this work has mainly been carried out by women. Mr. Speaker, that's, I think, a pretty sad reflection on decision makers in the health sector over a significant period of time. And I want to reflect too, Mr. Speaker, on the fact that, and Judy McGregor makes this point in her report, that this has had a differential geographic impact. So for community-based support workers in an urban environment, the failure to be adequately reimbursed for travel costs may be a relatively small consideration. But for those workers in an area like the one I live in, the travel time and distance between clients may be vast. And it may actually mean that it's completely non-viable to do that as a job, Mr. Speaker. And that certainly has been the case, with cost both to the workers and also to the clients. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm a member of the Health Committee. I look forward to those submissions. And I just want to conclude by saying thanks. Thanks to those workers for the work they do, for the perseverance and courage they showed in taking the cases that led to this situation, and for their generosity in the settlement that this bill legislates for. Thank you, Mr Speaker.
Carmel Cipollone.
Mr Speaker, I'm standing